This didn't start as drama, it started as a leak that was never supposed to exist. 8 minutes of hidden footage tied to 50 Cent's documentary have now triggered chaos across the entire music industry. Names are being mentioned, secrets are surfacing, and Cardi B is suddenly at the center of something she never publicly addressed. But the real question is, who decided this should come out now? This has crossed a line that can't be walked back from, because what began as whispers has now escalated into something far more volatile, something that feels like it could shake the industry overnight. At the center of it all is Cardi B, a name that usually dominates headlines for music, influence, and controversy on her own terms. But this time, the conversation is different. This time, it didn't come from a rival, a blog, or even the press. It allegedly came from someone who once stood right beside her, a former manager. And according to circulating claims, that's exactly what makes this situation so explosive. Because this wasn't just a comment or an interview slip. It was reportedly a leak. 8 full minutes of unreleased documentary footage tied to 50 Cent's highly controversial project. Footage that, according to insiders, was never meant to see the light of day. The moment it surfaced online, the reaction was immediate and chaotic. Phones started buzzing. Accounts began disappearing or going silent. And the audience didn't just watch. They reacted with panic, confusion, and suspicion. Because the material wasn't framed as harmless behind-the-scenes content. It was described as conversations, private exchanges, and moments that allegedly reveal a side of the story no one was supposed to access. And that's where the questions begin. What exactly is in those 8 minutes? And why would someone from Cardi B's former inner circle take the risk of exposing it? Was it revenge? Was it a warning? Or is there something even deeper unfolding behind the scenes that the public still doesn't understand? Some unverified reports suggest the timing wasn't accidental either, that it wasn't a random drop or emotional decision. Instead, it may have been strategically released at a moment when attention around 50 Cent's documentary was already building pressure. If that's true, then this stops being just a leak and starts looking like something calculated. But to understand why this moment feels so charged, you have to look beyond the footage itself. Cardi B has built her entire public identity on being unfiltered, outspoken, and unapologetically real. From the beginning of her rise, she's been seen as someone who says exactly what she thinks and moves exactly how she wants. Fans have embraced that authenticity. But behind any major artist operating at that level, there's always structure, managers, advisors, strategic decisions, and carefully managed relationships the public rarely sees. And that's where complexity naturally begins. Because when success comes fast and visibility becomes global, loyalty inside a team can become fragile. Over time, there have been quiet rumors and subtle observations from fans, shifts in her team, changes in management structure, and individuals who once appeared close but later vanished from the picture without clear explanation. At the time, most of it was dismissed as normal industry movement. But now, those same details are being re-examined under a very different light. Especially because one of those former insiders is now being directly linked to the alleged leak. According to circulating claims, this former manager had access, real access to conversations, decisions, private working dynamics, and moments the public was never supposed to hear about. Which raises a far more uncomfortable question. What did they know and why now choose to expose it? Because leaking material of this nature doesn't come without consequences. Professionally, legally, and personally, it's a high-risk move, which makes people wonder what could possibly push someone to go that far anyway. At the same time, attention turns back to 50 Cent's documentary itself. Even before this alleged leak, the project was already surrounded by speculation. Rumors suggested it contained sensitive material, unreleased footage, and private exchanges involving high-profile figures, content that could easily create tension across the industry. So when footage tied to that project suddenly appears online through someone allegedly connected to Cardi B's past team, the situation becomes far more complicated than simple drama. It begins to feel interconnected. Some reports claim that the former manager's departure from Cardi B's circle wasn't entirely smooth. There were reportedly disagreements, creative tensions, and unresolved issues that never fully made it into public view. Nothing confirmed, nothing clearly documented, but enough to fuel speculation once this leak surfaced. And then comes the detail that intensifies everything even further: timing. Because this didn't happen during a quiet news cycle. It didn't surface months ago when attention was elsewhere. It dropped precisely when conversations around the documentary were already heating up, right when public curiosity was rising, right when scrutiny was increasing. Which leads to the question people can't stop asking: why now? Was it meant to expose something? Was it meant to disrupt something? Or was it meant to send a message entirely unrelated to what the public is assuming? In situations like this, timing is rarely ignored. It becomes part of the narrative, and the more people analyze it, the more they start connecting dots, revisiting old interviews, reinterpreting past collaborations, and questioning moments that once seemed insignificant. Now, everything feels potentially meaningful. There's also a growing theory circulating among observers that the leak may not have been intended for mass public consumption at all, that it may have been directed at a specific individual or group, almost like a signal rather than a disclosure, a message embedded in exposure. If that interpretation holds any weight, then the implications shift dramatically, because it suggests the leak is not just about content being revealed, but about power, control, and who is aware of what inside the industry. And that's where things become increasingly uncertain. Because if even a portion of those 8 minutes contains what people claim, then this isn't just about one artist, one documentary, or one former manager. It becomes about a network of relationships, private dynamics, and industry interactions that were never meant to be public in the first place. But at this point, the footage is already out there. It's being watched, dissected, shared, and analyzed in real time. And with every new viewing, the number of questions only grows, not answers, questions. Because nothing about this situation feels isolated anymore. Not the leak itself, not the timing, and not the people allegedly involved. Instead, it feels like fragments of a much larger picture that hasn't fully revealed itself yet. And the most unsettling part is this: if 8 minutes of footage can trigger this level of reaction, then what else exists that hasn't surfaced? What remains hidden? And who, behind the scenes, is still connected to everything that's now beginning to unravel? For now, the surface has only been scratched. What happened next didn't just escalate the situation, it completely changed the direction of the entire story. Because those 8 minutes everyone was talking about, they weren't the end of anything, they were just the beginning. The moment that footage hit the internet, everything spiraled out of control. Not rumors, not edited screenshots, not secondhand claims, but a full 8-minute segment. Raw, unfiltered, and according to early viewers, deeply unsettling in a way nobody expected. It didn't appear on any major platform. There was no press release, no official drop. It surfaced quietly inside a private Telegram channel. No watermark, no branding, just a file with a name that instantly raised suspicion. Final cut do not ray. That alone was enough to pull people in. But what came next is what truly shifted everything. The footage allegedly opened with behind-the-scenes material from 50 Cent's documentary project, not the polished final cut, not the narrative version designed for public consumption. This was raw production footage, unstable camera angles, background noise, people speaking off mic, unaware they were even being recorded. And within the first minute, one name reportedly surfaced clearly: Cardi B. Not hinted, not indirectly referenced, directly mentioned. And the tone surrounding it wasn't casual. It was serious, almost deliberately heavy. One voice, still unidentified, allegedly said something that immediately changed the mood of the entire clip. She knows more than she's saying. From that point on, viewers reportedly went silent. Because suddenly, this wasn't just industry talk anymore. It felt personal. Then the footage shifts. A new scene appears, a dimly lit room, a private meeting. At least 3 individuals, faces partially obscured, voices lowered. The kind of environment where every word feels intentional. And then one statement cuts through everything. If this comes out, it's not just her, it's all of us. That line alone created confusion. All of us. Who is all of us, and what exactly are they referring to? Before anyone could process it, the footage jumps again. This time, an audio recording. A distorted phone call. Hard to fully understand, but certain phrases come through clearly. One voice, allegedly tied to someone from Cardi B's former circle, is heard saying, "He's putting everything in there, names, deals, even stuff from 2019. That year, 2019, instantly triggered speculation. Because fans immediately began connecting dots to old rumors, unresolved controversies, and moments that were never fully explained in public. Things people thought were long buried suddenly felt relevant again. But the most shocking moment hadn't arrived yet. Around the 4-minute mark, the footage allegedly cuts to something completely unexpected. 50 Cent himself. Not in an interview, not speaking to a camera, just sitting quietly listening. Off-camera voices continue warning him. "You sure you want to? Include that. Once this drops, you can't stop it." And his response? Calm, almost detached. It already started. That one line reportedly changed the entire tone of the leak. Because now it didn't feel like chaos. It felt intentional, like something already in motion. And then came the segment that divided everyone. Near the end of the 8-minute clip, a conversation allegedly involving Cardi B's former manager appears. The same individual now linked to the leak itself. And what they reportedly say flips the entire narrative. She wasn't supposed to be part of this, but she got pulled in. That statement alone changed how people interpreted everything. Because until that moment, the assumption was involvement, control, awareness, intention. But this suggested something different. Not leadership, not orchestration, but entanglement. That Cardi B may not have been driving anything, but instead caught inside something already in motion. And that's when the internet split in two. One side insisting she was fully aware, the other arguing she was pulled into a situation beyond her control. Two completely opposite narratives forming in real time. Then came the purge. Within hours, the original upload disappeared. The Telegram channel vanished. Accounts sharing the footage were taken down or suspended, almost like someone was trying to erase it entirely. But it was too late. Because once something like this spreads, it doesn't disappear, it multiplies. Re-uploads appeared everywhere. Different versions, edited cuts, slowed down audio, people dissecting every frame, every voice, every pause, trying to find certainty in something that only created more confusion. And the biggest question became unavoidable. Why would her former manager do this? Because nothing about it looked safe. Nothing about it looked controlled. In fact, it looked self-destructive. Which is exactly why people started thinking it couldn't be random. Maybe it wasn't a leak. Maybe it was retaliation. Or worse, a preemptive strike. A move made before someone else could control the narrative. And if that's true, then the 8-minute leak wasn't the story. It was the trigger. Because what followed proved one thing very clearly: this situation was far from over. Shortly after, new fragments began surfacing. Smaller clips, different angles, broken segments that felt like they were being released piece by piece, almost deliberately. And that's when people realized something unsettling. Those 8 minutes weren't the full story. They were only the surface layer. Because a second wave of footage started circulating. And this one felt different. It opened with a new timestamp, a different setting, a sharper, more aggressive tone. No quiet conversations this time. This was confrontation, raised voices, tension that felt immediate even through distorted audio. And in that chaos, a voice reportedly said something that went viral instantly. "You don't understand. Once this drops, nobody's safe, not even him." That word, him, changed everything again. Because now the speculation expanded. Was it 50 Cent, or someone far more powerful operating behind the scenes? Nobody agreed, but everyone felt the implication was bigger than any one person. And as more clips surfaced, patterns began to emerge. Names repeating, years mentioned again and again, deals referenced in fragments, meetings half described, moments that once seemed irrelevant now forming something that looked like structure. Almost like a hidden timeline buried inside scattered conversations. And then another clip dropped. Short, silent for a second, then one line. And everything got worse from there. And just when it felt like the situation couldn't get any more intense, it did. Because this time there were no distorted voices, no heavy edits, no shaky assumptions to hide behind. The next clip was different, clear, focused, uncomfortably real. It showed a document, just sitting there on a table. At first glance, it didn't look like much, slightly blurred in places, partially obscured, but still visible enough for people to read pieces of it. And those pieces were enough to send the entire internet into chaos. Because according to those who analyzed the footage frame by frame, the document wasn't random. It allegedly contained a list. Not just names, but roles, connections. And next to some of those names, there were symbols, marks, indicators that didn't look accidental. They looked organized, deliberate, like they meant something. And then came the detail that made everything freeze. One of the names, Young, was rumored to be connected to someone inside Cardi B's circle. Not confirmed, not proven, but in a moment like this, it didn't have to be. Because that was enough. Enough to shift the entire conversation. Because now this wasn't just about one person anymore. It wasn't even just about Cardi B. It started to feel like something bigger. Like a network, a system, a structure people hadn't fully seen before. And social media didn't just react. It exploded. Threads started appearing within minutes. People breaking down every frame, zooming into the document, enhancing the image, comparing it side by side with old screenshots, trying to decode every single detail like it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. And then one phrase took over everything. The list. That document became the center of the entire storm. Because now people weren't just curious. They were demanding answers. But right in the middle of that chaos, something happened that made things even worse. A verified account, believed by many to be linked to someone inside the industry, posted a message. Short, cryptic, and unsettling. "Y'all focused on the wrong person. The real story hasn't even started yet." That one sentence changed everything again. Because if this isn't the real story, then what is? What are people missing? And more importantly, who are they not looking at? But before anyone could even begin to process that, another clip surfaced. And this one hit differently. It reportedly showed a private conversation involving someone close to 50 Cent, not an outsider, not a critic, someone from his own side. And in that conversation, One line dropped that shook everything people thought they understood. He didn't make this alone, and he's not the one in control. Silence. That's what followed across the internet. Because up until that moment, the narrative felt simple. 50 Cent was the one behind the documentary. He was exposing people. He was driving the story. But now it sounded like he might not even be the one calling the shots. And that possibility changed the tone completely. Because if he isn't in control, then who is? Suddenly, this wasn't just about artists or leaks or controversy. It became about something deeper, something hidden. Forces behind the scenes. People no one had seen. Voices no one had heard. And the idea that there could be something larger pulling the strings. That's what made everything feel dangerous. Now people weren't just watching clips, they were questioning everything. Every statement, every silence, every detail that once seemed insignificant. Because nothing felt clear anymore. Not the leak. Not the motive. Not even the people involved. And then, just as the tension peaked, something else happened. The alleged source of the leak went silent. Completely. No posts, no statements, no denial, no explanation. Gone. And that silence, that's what made people the most uneasy. Because in situations like this, silence rarely means nothing. It usually means something is happening behind the scenes, something bigger than what's visible, something controlled, something intentional. Because if even part of those clips are real, if that document is real, then this isn't just a leak anymore. This is exposure on a level people aren't used to seeing. And what comes next? It might be even worse. At this point, the internet wasn't just reacting, it was detonating. Because the moment those new clips surfaced, especially the list, everything changed. This stopped feeling like celebrity drama. It stopped feeling like gossip. It started feeling serious, unpredictable, and maybe even dangerous. People responded exactly how you'd expect when fear mixes with curiosity. They lost control. Every platform turned into a battlefield. Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Hashtags exploded worldwide in minutes. Cardi B exposed. 50 Cent documentary. The list leak. And one that stood out above all. Who is next? That's when things took a darker turn. Because now people weren't just watching. They were waiting. Expecting another name, another clip, another reveal. And the theories. They went wild. One viral post with millions of views said, "This ain't a documentary. This is an operation, and we're only seeing pieces." Another wrote, "The silence right now, that tells you everything." And honestly, they had a point. Because while fans were loud, artists were doing the opposite. Going quiet, deleting posts, canceling appearances, disappearing completely from social media. And that silence, it was loud. Because when people who are always active suddenly vanish, it doesn't feel random. It feels intentional. And right in the middle of all this, Cardi B herself. Silent. No tweet, no Instagram stories, no response. Nothing. And that's what made people even more suspicious. Because she's known for speaking up, for responding instantly, for saying exactly what's on her mind. But now, nothing. So people started asking questions. Is she being told to stay quiet? Or is she waiting? Because silence like that doesn't happen without a reason. And then there's 50 Cent. Same pattern. After days of cryptic posts and subtle hints, suddenly nothing. And when both of them go quiet at the same time, that's when people really start paying attention. Because it doesn't feel like coincidence. It feels coordinated. Or worse, controlled. But the tension didn't stop there. Celebrities started reacting without reacting. You know what that looks like. Indirect posts, cryptic captions, messages that don't say much, but say just enough. One artist wrote, "Some truths aren't meant for the public." Another posted, "When the smoke clears, watch who's still standing." Then deleted it minutes later. Too late. Screenshots were already everywhere. And fans were analyzing every word, trying to figure out who knew what and who was afraid. Then the media stepped in. Headlines got louder, more aggressive. Explosive leaked ties, major artists to secret network. Industry in panic mode after documentary footage surfaces. Cardi B linked to viral clip, questions remain. But here's the problem. Even the media didn't have answers. For every report, there were contradictions. Different sources, different interpretations, different versions of the same story. And that confusion, it made everything worse. Because when people don't have answers, they create their own. And that's exactly what's happening now. Speculation turning into belief. Belief turning into division. Because now the audience is split. One side defending Cardi B, saying she's being dragged into something she didn't start, possibly set up, possibly used. The other side, not convinced. They believe she knew, that she was involved, and that she just never expected any of this to come out. The divide wasn't just growing anymore, it was hardening. Because at this point, nobody wanted to be wrong. Nobody wanted to back down. And more importantly, nobody had the full picture. Every new claim only made the gap between belief and suspicion wider. But what happened next didn't just add fuel to the fire. It changed the temperature entirely. A new report began circulating, quiet at first, almost easy to ignore. Then it spread, fast. According to multiple unverified sources, this wasn't the end of the leaks. It was the beginning of something bigger. More footage, longer clips, cleaner audio, more direct evidence, and the names involved, reportedly far more significant than anything seen so far. And suddenly the conversation shifted from, "What is this?" to something far more uncomfortable. When is the next drop? Because that's where things were now. Not uncertainty, but anticipation. People refreshing feeds every few seconds, waiting for the next shock to land. Not wondering if something else would appear, but when it would hit. And that kind of tension doesn't stay calm for long. Because when the internet is waiting like that, every second feels loaded. Every silence feels suspicious. Every delay feels intentional. And right in the middle of that pressure, it happened. No warning, no buildup, no gradual reveal. Just a drop. A brand new video file. Longer, sharper, clearer. And far more dangerous than anything before it. The title alone made people stop scrolling. Uncut segment, do not release under any circumstances. That was all it took. Within seconds, it was everywhere. Not because people understood it, but because they knew they had to see it. And what they saw first changed the tone instantly. A direct-to-camera recording. 50 Cent. No cinematic framing, no documentary polish. Just him, serious, locked in, and speaking in a way that felt completely different from anything before. And then he said the line that made everything feel real. This wasn't supposed to come out like this, but since it did, let's stop pretending. Silence. Not just in the video, but across the internet. Because that didn't sound like speculation anymore. That sounded like confirmation. Then the structure of the footage shifted. This wasn't random anymore. This wasn't fragmented chaos. This was organized, deliberate, almost like someone laying pieces on a table in order. Clips followed one after another, Not disconnected, but connected, like a timeline unfolding in real time. And at the center of it all, a breakdown. Dates, years, names, events. A full sequence that suddenly made earlier moments look less random and more connected. And then came the section that changed everything. A heading appeared on screen. Initial entry point. Below it, a blurred image. A partially hidden name. But not hidden enough. Because viewers started freezing frames, enhancing footage, comparing notes. And according to thousands of breakdowns online, the name appeared to be tied to someone from Cardi B's past management circle. Not a random figure. Someone who had been there during a critical phase of her rise. And that changed the interpretation instantly. Because if that timeline was accurate, then this didn't start with the documentary. It didn't start with the leaks. It didn't even start recently. It went back years, long before any of this was public, which meant the 8-minute leak everyone focused on. It wasn't the story. It was the trigger, a starting point for something already in motion. But the most chilling moment came next. A private conversation. Two voices, one allegedly tied to that former manager, the aunt. Her unidentified. And what they said cut through everything else. You think this ends with her. This goes way higher than that. Higher. That single word flipped the entire conversation upside down. Because higher doesn't mean one person. It doesn't mean one career. It doesn't mean one situation. It suggests structure, layers, a system bigger than what people were looking at. And just when viewers thought that was the peak, the final seconds appeared. A simple message on screen. But it landed like a warning. Part 4 contains everything. Everything. And that's when the internet broke again. Because now it wasn't curiosity anymore. It was fear mixed with obsession. Part 4. If this was Part 3, what could possibly be left? More names, more proof, things that can't be dismissed, things that can't be walked back. And suddenly, every earlier clip felt smaller, like fragments of something still unfinished. But here's what made it even more unsettling. After all of this surfaced, silence. Cardi B. Silent. 50 Cent. Silent. No responses, no clarification, no denials. Nothing. And in situations like this, silence doesn't feel like absence. It feels like control. Like something is still being decided behind the scenes. Because at this point, the pattern is hard to ignore. Information doesn't feel random anymore. It feels released, controlled, timed, like pieces of a system being revealed one by one until the full picture is unavoidable. And if that's true, then someone is orchestrating this. Someone is deciding what the world sees and when. Which means we're not just watching a story unfold. We're being guided through it. Step by step. Piece by piece. Until there's nothing left hidden. But that final reveal, it doesn't feel like an ending. It feels like a collapse waiting to happen. Because reputations, careers, entire legacies, none of them survive something like this unscathed if even half of it is real. And until Part 4 arrives, all anyone can do is wait. Refresh. Watch. Speculate. And wonder what breaks first. The silence or the system behind it. Because one thing is certain now. This story isn't slowing down. It's building towards something that hasn't fully shown itself yet. And when it does, there won't be any way to undo what comes next.